Hey, my name is Jennifer, and this is my ED 307 Constructivism project. So, what exactly is constructivism? Constructivism is a learning theory that explains how people might gain knowledge. It says that we often put together knowledge and meaning from personal, active experiences. In a constructivist classroom, students are encouraged to engage in authentic assignments instead of assignments they cannot make a real-life connection to. Students often construct their own meaning by drawing on prior knowledge and personal experience. So, who came up with the idea of constructivism? Well, the idea of constructivism came about in the early to mid-1900s. John Dewey is considered to be the founder of constructivism. He did not believe schools should put all of their effort into rote memorization and direct instruction. He held that students should engage in collaborative groups and real-world situations. Jean Piaget believed that students learn best while actively testing their own theories and that learning is a dynamic process. Jerome Brunner believed that everyone learns differently and interacting with peers is one of the most effective forms of learning. Lev Vygotsky did not agree with Piaget that you can separate learning from social context. Vygotsky focused on cognitive development, and he developed the zone of proximal development. So what is the zone of proximal development? It is the range of abilities that an individual can perform with assistance but cannot yet perform independently. These skills are called proximal because the individual is close to mastering them, but needs more guidance and practice in order to perform these actions independently. This is important in classrooms because teachers need to push students slightly past their current skills and provide ongoing scaffolding to support all of their students. So these leaders brought about some change in different areas for teaching and learning. The first area we are going to discuss today is the curriculum. The curriculum in a traditional classroom setting is the driving force of education. The textbook is the main resource of information. Teachers often rely on rote memorization and teach just the basic skills, focusing on the small part leading up to the whole. On the flip side, in a constructivist classroom, many resources are relied on, and it is learner-centered, meaning the students are the driving force for the education. In a constructivist classroom, material is often presented first as the big idea or whole, and then students do the work to figure out the parts that make the whole. Because students are the driving force for why we do what we do, let's look at how students are viewed in these two types of classroom settings. In a typical classroom, students are to take in what the teacher says, memorize it, and repeat it back. Students are passive learners that are receivers of information. They are to sit quietly and not question the teacher. Knowledge and information exist outside of the student in a textbook, and they are to just read about it. There is little interaction among peers. Students' opinions about the lesson are rarely valued. However, in a constructivist classroom, students are active learners that interact with activities to gain knowledge within themselves. They construct meaning, ask questions, and work with groups to find out new and interesting concepts. They are gaining their own knowledge and using many platforms and tools to do so. Students in a constructivist classroom are respected and encouraged to ask questions about the material. Their value and opinion matter to the teacher and are often the guiding element for the lesson. So, speaking of students, how do students work in the classroom? In a traditional classroom setting, you would expect to see students sitting in neat little rows, quietly taking notes as a teacher is standing in front of the classroom talking at them. In a constructivist classroom, students may be all over the place, working in groups, asking questions, performing experiments, and are actively involved in their own education. While this may seem like mass chaos to a passerby, a good teacher has what I like to call organized chaos taking place. All students are actively working and figuring things out. The teacher still maintains control while allowing the students the freedom to explore and learn. So what about the teacher? What is the teacher's role in all of this? In a traditional classroom, a teacher is basically a dictator of knowledge and ultimate authority. The teacher tells students what they need to know. They use the curriculum as their guide for what they need to cover to ensure students perform well on standardized testing. A constructivist teacher is a facilitator for the students to engage in finding their own knowledge. In a constructivist classroom, the teacher views ideas as negotiable and values their students' opinions as they work through lessons. Instead of swaying a student to do things they would, they encourage the student to find their own way to the answer. A constructivist teacher uses different pathways to knowledge. They can use project-based learning, group work, discussions, hands-on experiments, and technology. Constructivist teachers are not afraid of change, and they often bring on big positive changes in their students. The last big idea about constructivism we are going to discuss are assessments. In a traditional classroom, summative assessments are often used. These include exams, papers, graded projects, and standardized tests. They are mostly formal assessment measures that give a number grade. In a constructivist classroom, many forms of assessment are used. They might use formative assessments that evaluate student understanding, and they are not usually graded, just a feedback of understanding. Constructivist assessments can also include observation, quality of work and learning taking place, finding out misconceptions that may have happened along the way. Questions, discussion, group work, group projects, and experiments are also ways to assess in a constructivist classroom. This doesn't mean the teachers never use summative assessments, but they are not the end-all be-all and are used to help guide student learning. The last thing we are going to discuss today is the PAR model of learning and how it relates to constructivism. PAR stands for present, apply, and review. In the present stage, you are letting the student know the big ideas, what's the goal, what's the objective, giving new material, and presenting abstract ideas with concrete examples. The next step is apply. This is where a majority of the lesson should take place. In application, students are working to apply knowledge, theories, skills, and ideas they heard about during the presentation. Students will be working in groups, doing projects, experiments, case studies, research, and using their own evaluation skills to judge the authenticity of their work. The last section is review, and this is the least amount of time. In review, the teacher allows for discussions, questions, answers, and goes over big ideas and key points. Depending on the lesson, it may or may not include some sort of quiz or assessment. The difference between PAR and constructivism is that the PAR is a detailed 3-point steps, whereas constructivist classrooms don't necessarily have an exact map for learning. So what could you teach using the PAR model? A lesson that I would teach using the PAR model is density. During the present stage, I would tell students that we are going to perform an experiment using 7 different liquids to determine their density. I would explain that density is a characteristic of a substance and that all substances have different densities. So at this point, I would not tell them it has to do with mass and volume. I'm going to let them figure that part out. I would tell them that the liquids we are using and the procedure that we are going to use for the experiment and that the goal is to get them to layer without mixing. I would also let them know that if they wanted to add food coloring to the clear liquids, that they were welcome to. Then I would let them start the experiment and go into the apply section. I would let them work in their groups and just start making a mess and learning. They would have to make decisions on the order the liquids were going into the container, how to pour the liquids, where to put them, and who is going to do these things. If their mixture turns into a mess, they would have to work with each other to figure out why and try again. Along the way, they could ask questions and clarify as they decided what does or does not work. After they have finished, I would go into the review section where we would talk about the density of the material. That density doesn't necessarily mean weight. I would have discussion, answer questions, go back over key points, and summarize their findings from the experiment. After we were finished, I would have them work in their groups to make an entry in their video journal about what took place during their lesson, what they learned about density, as well as upload a picture of their final experiment. And that is the end of my presentation about constructivism and PAR, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Thank you.